Thank you. I'm Joanne and I'm a transport planner at Staffordshire County Council. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the way that Staffordshire County Council calculates access to employment. We've utilised TRACC and its predecessor Accession since the software was first launched. I think everyone would agree that the most popular output for calculations is probably the travel time contour. And we consider that that's especially suitable for calculations where all destinations can be considered to be equally appropriate, such as GP surgeries, primary schools and supermarkets, if we suspend the elements of preference and perception amongst our communities. Access to employment is different, as it's unlikely that the nearest employment destination will match in terms of salary, training and qualifications. Destinations can also vary greatly in terms of the number of jobs available. People also value choice, picking up on what Dan said previously. I think that accurately measuring access to employment is really important for the County Council. It makes a significant contribution to transport policy formation and also local plan allocations. So for us, it's definitely worthwhile investing staff resources to produce a more sophisticated output. Next slide, please. Walter Hanson wrote a journal article for the Journal of the American Planning Association in 1959, where he defined accessibility. So I quote, "Accessibility is defined as the potential of opportunities for interaction." And this definition differs from the usual one in that it's a measure of the intensity of the possibilities of interaction, rather than just a measure of the ease of interaction. And obviously the ease of interaction can easily mean travel time. He went on to say that in terms of employment, accessibility is directly proportionate to the number of jobs and inversely proportional to a function of distance. Accession, which was the predecessor to TRACC, provided a range of outputs based on Hanson's definition of accessibility, and these were called Hanson scores. Results could be produced based on either origins or destinations, and could also be weighted by additional data provided by the user. The County Council favoured the origin Hanson weighted calculation. I should mention that TRACC doesn't include the function to produce Hanson scores as an output, but as the 2004 Accession User Manual explained the formula used by the software, we're able to manually replicate the Hanson scores. So the origin Hanson weighted output is defined as a measure that combines the disbenefit of travel in terms of travel time with a weighting by the attractiveness of the destination in terms of job numbers and by the number of people affected. We've adapted this slightly to omit the weighting of the number of people affected, as excluding the population element enables us to overlay various land use development options onto the results without having to recalculate the Hanson score for each land use option. Using Hanson scores does mean that we require an estimate of the number of jobs at each employment destination, which can be fairly resource intensive when we come to review the dataset. We define employment destinations as town centres, industrial estates, business parks and hospitals. And our economic regeneration team is key to providing job estimation data for us. Next slide, please. This is an example of a Hanson score output for South Staffordshire, which is a rural district. South Staffs relies on substantial commuting into neighbouring authorities for employment. The district is entirely comprised of villages. So the plan shows access to employment by bus and rail between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning on an average Wednesday, with a maximum total travel time of 60 minutes, including any changes that are made. Employment destinations are shown as black squares. The Hanson score file used in the GIS software is a series of points. They are the elements of the origin grid which achieved access to employment. We've chosen to style them as circles without borders to produce an effect that's similar to contour plans. Areas with the lowest Hanson scores are coloured red and the highest Hanson scores are coloured purple. For this calculation, the lowest result was 44 and the highest result was approximately 290,000. The range is obviously much, much wider than for contour plans, which for us would show a travel time up to a maximum of 60 minutes. In South Staffs, the highest levels of accessibility are experienced by villages with rail stations, as they provide access to cities such as Wolverhampton and Birmingham within the parameters of the calculation. The number of jobs accessible via public transport is many times greater than that of neighbouring villages without rail stations. The red areas are focused on the more remote villages that experience the longest travel times by bus and also have limited service options, therefore providing access to fewer destinations overall. Using Hansen scores enables us to draw this distinction out and clearly show it on a plan that everyone, including non-transport planners, would be able to understand. The results are divided into quantiles. For this plan, that's sextiles. We vary the number of quantiles depending on the range of the data, and the range of the data is heavily dependent on the number of jobs at the destinations. We prefer to use equal ranges in terms of the Hansen score rather than equal number of data items. Next slide, please. This is an extract of the Excel spreadsheet calculation that produced the previous plan. So it's built from a CSV output from TRACC. We've added in the columns I, J and K to the right-hand side. Each row is an origin destination pair. You'll see that column A is the origin grid ID numbers. So a row is present for an OD pair, even if access wasn't achieved. Therefore, we begin by removing all the rows that returned no access. Then, using the destination name column, which is column E, we in Excel perform a VLOOKUP with a separate file containing the job number estimates to produce column I, which I've indicated with a pink arrow. The disbenefit of travel time that I mentioned in the definition of a Hansen score is accounted for by using a deterrence parameter. The Department for Transport in the 2000s produced guidance containing deterrence parameters for different circumstances, such as journey purpose and area type. The heading of column J shows the deterrence parameter used in this calculation, which is negative 0.03. An exponential of the deterrence parameter multiplied by the travel time is shown in column J. This is then multiplied by the number of jobs available at the destination to produce the figure shown in column K. Column K is then subtotaled for each origin point. You can see the subtotal rows highlighted by the horizontal pink arrows. The subtotaled row is then the final Hansen score for each origin point. We export this data out to our GIS software, and in the software, we join the Hansen scores to an origin grid shapefile that we've previously exported from TRACC. This is then drawn up as per the previous plan, split into quantiles to suit the data based on the range of numbers involved. It would be absolutely fantastic if more TRACC users choose to adopt Hansen scores in their accessibility analysis, and then also take the time to get in touch with Dan at Basemap to request that it's added to the range of standard outputs within the TRACC software. Notwithstanding that, it's also definitely worthwhile processing the data within Excel. However, it would be much faster and more convenient to have the calculation at the touch of a button within the software. I understand in previous years that there was insufficient interest to warrant putting this within the software. Next slide, please. So to help any interested people look into Hansen scores further, I've provided some references. The first reference is a link to the DFT Deterrence Parameter Guidance document. The second is a link to a guidance note produced on Basemap that gives instructions to produce very basic Hansen scores. And finally, there's a link to an example of a Staffordshire County Council accessibility report that includes Hansen score outputs and descriptions of them. Thank you very much.